Okay, so hi everyone, and I'm a bit sick, so if you hear my coughing, I'll try to block my microphone, but I'm not always successful with that, so we'll see. I try, and my previous talk, I had a talk here, and I was able to go the entire talk without blowing my nose even one time, so let's hope for the best here as well. Okay, so technical documentation. I know it's not always the most thrilling topic out there, but it is very, very important in my opinion, and I hope that after this presentation you will understand why is it so important to practice it. And basically I will cover how can I write technical documentation better and why should I care, and when I say I of course also mean you. So first of all, hi, my name is Hila. I'm a senior DevOps engineer and I work for Wix. I have 15 years of experience in tech industry. I've written a lot of documentation during this time. I am a firm believer in communities. That's why I'm part of the AWS Community Builders program. And I'm a HashiCorp ambassador because I talk about Terraform quite a lot as well. I also help organize conferences in Israel, where I live, DevOps Days Tel Aviv, which is the largest DevOps Days event in the entire world, if I'm not mistaken. I'm a DevOps culture fan. I think this is what helps companies achieve great things. And in my spare time, I'm a lead singer in a cover band, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so I believe that anyone can and should write technical documentation because one simple example to it. In the middle of the night, when I have an incident, and I had just a talk about incidents, so it's very easy for me to bring examples from this talk. In the middle of the night, when there's an incident, and I don't know what to do, and I'm not sure what to do, if I have a runbook that helps me understand what I need to do, believe me, the last thing that I think about in the middle of the night when I read the runbook is, oh, the English in this runbook is fabulous. Oh, he phrased it so nicely. I don't care. As long as the runbook is concise and clear and helps me fix the issue, this is all I care about. So whether you have broken English or a fabulous one, I don't care, just share the knowledge, and then that's why I believe that everyone should practice and write technical documentation to share the knowledge as much as we can. And basically, and this is something that I like to say, that if you can't automate it, so document it. So everything can be treated as the technical documentation. So like the straightforward thing is system logical design or a brief, but also anything else. So on-call runbooks, as I mentioned just now, code readmes to explain why things are written in a certain way in the code, or explain the functional aspects of code. Onboarding docs, so if you want to onboard people to your team, you can have onboarding docs and then eliminate the need to have a buddy, because then you have onboarding docs that help the people onboard themselves. Slack pin messages, even Slack pin messages, you can post something and then pin it in the relevant channel, and then it could help a lot of people with references to other documentation or anything that is related to that channel. Project planning doc, if you have like a massive project that needs and has a lot of moving parts, you can create a project planning doc, and then a lot of things could be covered there, and it could be serving as a status page for everyone that wants to know what's going on with the project and where does it stand, and a lot of other aspects of the project itself. So everything could be technical documentation, and I'm not saying you have to practice all of it and you have to write everything. But even if you just select one or few of those and share the knowledge, it will be so much more helpful than what it was before. So anything that you can write and pass along the knowledge, it will be super, super helpful. So I want to ask you this question, okay? Have you ever said this sentence or heard this sentence before? My code is self-documented. If so, raise your hand. Don't lie, people. Don't lie. Come on. Thank you. So that's the thing. Everyone is either said the sentence or heard the sentence before, okay? And I heard a lot of people saying, just read the code and understand what it is about. No. The code tells the story. No, it doesn't, okay? It never is the case. So that's the thing. We have to have documentation to help us understand things that happen in code. For example, if the code is a spaghetti code, or to understand how moving parts inside code, like why is this function calls these functions, or anything related, we need to understand and document our code in order to understand better how it works, why we maintain it in a certain way, etc. So anything should and could be covered in technical documentation, because it's not self-documented, it will never be self-documented. So if I haven't convinced you until now, why should you write technical documentation? Here are some more reasons for it. So first of all, to reduce your work volume. And when I say reduce, you say, hey, wait, if I sit down and I write technical documentation, it doesn't reduce my work volume, it increases it, right? Because I sit down, I write the documentation, but I want to share an example to what I mean here. So in my previous company, as a DevOps engineer, I get approached by QA people, developers, and each of them had their own development environment because the company had a lot of money. So everyone came to me and said, hey, why is my pod red in Kubernetes? And why is this and why is that? So, and I noticed that a lot of the questions are repetitive, and basically everyone asks a lot of the questions over and over again. So in order to really create a self-service, I wanted to enable them to do stuff on their own. I basically created a document that I called it like tips and trips. I had a bad trip here to Munich, so it's stuck in my mind. Tips and tricks by DevOps. So I gathered all the repetitive questions in that document, and then I did like a Zoom meeting for them. I went over all the topics, and once I released this document to them, then from like 7 or 8 times a day that I got approached, it got reduced to 1 or 2 times a day, which was awesome because then it reduced my work volume. I had to do less support work. And then it also allowed me to provide self-service enablement for them. They could troubleshoot things on their own. I wasn't anymore a bottleneck because if I'm not available to help them, then they're stuck. They can't proceed with the development or whatever. So that way, it increased their velocity. They felt even better because they could troubleshoot things on their own and they didn't need to wait for me. So it's a win-win for everyone. Eliminate production incidents quicker. As I mentioned before, if we have runbooks, it will help us eliminate production incidents because if I don't know what to do, my team member that does know can create a runbook for that system that he may be deployed or manage frequently. And then these incidents can be handled by everyone and not only this specific person. Then we can eliminate the incidents much more quickly because of those runbooks. Avoid single point of failure or a bottleneck, which is you. Because I will ask you this rhetorical question. Do you want to go on vacation and still be available for work calls? Or do you want to go on vacation with a clear head? Okay? That's exactly the thing. And I would say it here, job security is dead. Okay, no more job security. We need to share the knowledge, and we have this even the saying that AI is going to take our jobs. So let's prevent it from doing that and share the knowledge between us human beings in order to prevent this from happening. Another thing, it will help make things clear for you or the future you. Okay, because once you structure things and write them down in a clear manner, it will organize it in your mind as well, and also for your future you, because let's say you did something now, and a year from now you need to still maintain it, and you don't remember all the bits and pieces because, you know, the human mind works in a way that we forget things. So if you document whatever it needs to be documented, like I have like this, I did a migration to a GitLab, self-hosted GitLab, and I documented everything, like how to do the deployments, which is frequent, so you can remember that, but how to renew certificates, and where are they, and the whole procedure, how to do the integrations of Jenkins and Jira, which happens only when you deploy GitLab for the first time. So these are the things that I'm going to do like once in a while, and I don't want to research it all over again if something happens to the system. I want to have like a go-to that if I need to do it again to renew certificates or anything that is not happening on a daily basis, I have a go-to to check how to do it, and I don't need to waste my time and researching it if I did it already for the first time. And also intentions, reasoning, anything that is not straightforward to help manage the systems can be covered here and will be super helpful in your day-to-day. Visibility. So it will also, just a sec. I told you. It will also attract focus to the things that you do at work, which in turn help you progress your career. Because if, let's say we deployed systems, we do some things, if nobody knows about it, they don't know that we are the focal points, or they didn't know the full extent of the things that we did, then maybe we wouldn't get opportunities at work to be a tech lead or to be something, because they don't know the full extent of our abilities to lead projects and stuff like that. So if we are visible in our day-to-day, then it's awesome, because people know, okay, she can lead an entire migration of a code-based repository of 200 and more repositories without a single downtime. Okay, she could do a lot more than just projects, for example. So anything that you're doing, be visible about it, and how you can be visible about it? Through documentation. Write documentation. Share the documentation in Slack channels, let's say if you run runbooks, you write runbooks, then put the links to the runbooks in the alerts themselves, and then people see, oh, things happen, and you know a lot of things. It will definitely progress your career in turn. And also, it is a way to communicate things to your managers, because that way they see the extent of your work, and not just through Jira tickets. And it will show that you're a team player, and not just something that you write in CV, but actual team player, because you care about your team member success. That's why you write documentation, to help them achieve success and be able to maintain the system that you usually maybe maintain. And that way, everyone basically is a win-win for everyone. And last but not least, this writing documentation will help you understand why are we doing things in a certain way. So I gave you the GitLab documentation example. So why did I set the certificates here? Or in Terraform, why there are community models? Why did I choose to write a model of my own, and I did it very complex? I need to document these kind of things. Because only that way we will be able to defend the decisions that we are taking and to communicate them to others. Another reason, again, with the GitLab, I'm going to probably mention the GitLab documentation quite often, because it gives me a lot of backbone for this presentation. In the migration to GitLab, the GitLab documentation shows the DB version, the default one in the Helm chart, is X. But I chose to go with a different version. Why did I do that? There was a very good reason to do that. I did it for backward compatibility and something like that. And if I don't document it, and by the way, I left the company shortly after I did the migration to GitLab, then potentially someone will see it and say, hey, the DB version is outdated, we need to update it. No, there's a reason why I chose it. It was a very intentional reason. If I'm not documenting it, then people will do, first of all, unnecessary work, and second of all, will harm the system, because I actually did it to allow new versions to come out. So that's the thing. We need to document these kind of things to defend decisions, to explain why we did things in a certain way, and that way it will help managing things in the long run. Okay, I hope that I convinced you until now why it's so important to write technical documentation for several reasons. Now let's see how to write technical documentation without being a technical writer, because some of us, English is not my native language, and I have a team member that really hates writing and still now is writing because he understands the importance. So let's see how to do that without being like a guru in English and stuff like that. We can do it in a very simple way, and let's see. First of all, start out with knowing your audience. So, based on your audience, you'll know what needs to be covered and to which extent. And this is your time to plan and write in bullet points what you're going to cover in the document. If you can write and update the document on the go, that's great. If not, just write in bullet points and then update it once you have the time to really sit on it. So, we have basically two types of audience, when the document is for internal use, like system design, etc., and when it is external use, like API documentation and stuff like that. So what should I write about for internal use documents? Things that you worked on while working on them, because we remember things better when they are still fresh in our minds. So document these parts right now, because then you'll be able to detail about these parts during writing the documentation. And if you can't, again, at least write bullet points that will remind you, yeah, I need to cover it, and then cover it whenever you have the time to sit on it. Things that bugged you, okay? So other people won't run into it as well. Example, when I did the You guessed it, GitLab migration. I opened a lot of support tickets to GitLab because I encountered a lot of things and I had to deal with things, and so that's why I opened support tickets. And like on the 2 or 3 times consistently when I opened the tickets, I opened them. They replied after 3 or 4 days because it's not production yet. And then they say, send us logs. Because, okay, how do I send logs? You run a CLI command, and then it generates the logs they created in the bundle, and then I send it over. Okay, so I can save time next time opening a ticket, run the CLI command in advance, and then attach the logs for the already on my initial support opening, ticket opening. So that way I save time for the people to not wait 4 days for a response, and also I avoid the ping pong between me and support because I provide the logs upfront. So this is only an example, but if you have anything that you ran into that bugged you or you can save time for others, this is the place to document it as well. Things that aren't clear or straightforward, so like the DB version that I mentioned, why did I choose to do DB version X and not go with the default in the chart? That's one example. Also, if the code is not clear, explain the flow with describing actual functions. It will be super helpful for anyone that needs to maintain this code. What do I write about for external use, for users or consumers? So write what is it about, possible use cases, and quick start. Any quirks, issues, and things to consider when using this X. And also examples, simple and complex, because what is all the deal about external use documentation? You have users, they can't communicate with you, right? They can't come into you like, when it is internal, yeah, the developer can come to me and say, and ask questions and get more clarification, but here, they don't have any interface with you. Maybe there's a support, but the support is usually for the entire platform and not specifically for the documentation. And yeah, they can ask things about the documentation, but so they don't have like a direct interface with you, the developers that wrote the documentation. So that's why you have to help them as much as you can. So you need to provide examples, simple and complex, to help them achieve whatever they need to achieve on their own. And so if it's like an API documentation, for example, document everything that you can in order to help the user utilize and understand what they need to do in order to make the API work and call it properly. So that's about that. Next phase is to decide or abide upon a documentation type. So basically, there are 2 types. There's docs in a knowledge base, which like a conference and stuff like that. And there's docs as code. Docs as code is where you interact with the docs in your IDE. So it's awesome for the developers because you don't need to leave the IDE. And we all know that developers don't like to leave the IDEs. So that's awesome. And basically, it means that the documents are fully integrated into the dev toolchain, which is great because it makes it very easier to maintain it in the long run and in a day-to-day basic. And when I say decide or abide upon, I mean the fact that maybe we are, small, how do you call it, screwdriver in the chain, and we can't really decide and say, hey, let's move to docs as code. And we tried. I know that I tried to move things around, but sometimes, we are heavily using Conference, for example, and we can't move to something else. So maybe we can move only a small portion, like only the docs that covers the code functions to be covered as docs as code, but then runbooks and stuff like that, stuff that are most procedural, then keep still in the conference. So that's good. So just make sure that whether you need to abide upon or whether you can do the decision yourself, make sure that you try to be as consistent as possible, because you don't want to have this clarity of people like, okay, I have documentation, I know that there is documentation, but where should I search it? Do I search it in some sort of repo? I search it in a conference? Try to be as consistent as you can in order to help your users find it as easily as possible. Some general content guidelines in terms of writing documentation. So first of all, you should have a table of contents in every document that you write. It is essential for content discovery. And why is that? Because of the user flow. And this is the user flow. It starts with searching a term, something. basically like have the user search for a buzzword or something, and then he finds some, he have some options like in the search results. The user scan whatever they get. If they found something that is worthwhile, they found what they are looking for, then it's the result. If not, they need to navigate elsewhere. So that's why you should always have, first of all, for the search, you should have meaningful titles and subheadings for the documents, because people usually search by the most critical things. Like if they want to read about GitLab, they will write GitLab, so I have to have GitLab in the heading, right? So have meaningful titles and subheadings. And whenever they need to navigate elsewhere, it means that we have to have links. So let's say we have a system that is about X, but then there is relation to some other system. So let's link to the other system, and maybe we will help the user this way, because then he wouldn't find whatever they were looking for in my document, but since I had a link, then they will find whatever they are looking for. So think about the issue or the thing with the links. Think about it like microservices, okay? Every document stands on its own, but then we have link for another document, so they interact between themselves, but still each document have its own purpose and own like bone and flesh to serve as a document on its own. So the links are super important, because that way they can read more or they have other references, and still we keep the document minimal to cover only the things that should be covered in this document, and we don't confuse the user to find something that they didn't expect to find in this document, and I will cover it more in a bit. Highlights. So put in bold whatever you can, because again, people, I didn't say it, and it's very important to say, people don't read, okay? People don't read documents, they scan them, okay? And you think about yourself, you don't read the documents to the full. First of all, you scan it, and only then, if you think it is worthwhile and it's really what you needed, then you start to read it. And also, I found it like a reference from 1997 that people don't read, they scan. So it's like throughout humanity, people don't like to read. So that's the thing. People always skim through documents and scan them, and they don't really read them, at least not at the first. So that's why we need to help people do that. And how do we help people skim through documents? Through highlights. So put bold wherever you can. And in terms of colors, this could be a bit controversial, because some people are colorblind and stuff like that. But at least from my experience, I noticed that when I put things in color, then the developers, okay, I need to watch out of X because it's in red. Okay, so colors help here. So if there's no issues with colors and accessibility issues in your company or your department, then you should utilize it, in my opinion. Words and sentences, okay? So again, we need to help people skim through the document. The way to do it is by using short words and more sentences, rather than longer words and fewer sentences. Check it out. If you don't believe me, you'll see that it's easier to scan the document that way. And please, please, please help people by writing in simple English. Don't try to be Shakespeare, okay? Write simple American English that non-English speakers can easily understand. And just a quick reference, I gave this talk in Berlin, and they laughed so hard in this slide, because apparently the Shakespeare and Company place is in Berlin. So they were super excited to see a reference in Berlin. I didn't know it's in Berlin, and they laughed. I'm like, I didn't know the joke was so good. Okay, so it was funny. So yeah. Simple English, super helpful, because you deal with people all the time. I have a team member in Kiev. Other people, are from any types of the world. Some people know English better, some less. So in order to really have a baseline with everyone, write simple English. That way everyone can understand whatever it says. Let's cover more a bit about the Doxis code that I mentioned before. So, Doxis code, the documentation is written in Markdown, which is for the win. And why is that? Because you still are able to write a table of contents and use highlights and even colors. The documentation is written in plain text, so it is human readable. It is easy to write and diff between documents, and it is platform agnostic. You can integrate it wherever, it doesn't matter where. Since it is platform agnostic, you can just do it. The docs is, the folder of the docs is in the same code repo, so again, the docs is integrated in the dev toolchain, and there's no need to leave the IDE while you write documentation. And you can even do PR review. So let's say we want to make sure the document is up to date and the quality of the code of the document is good, and the documentation even exists. Then we can do a PR review. This is how we do it in Wix, by the way. And that way, if it happens, then great. The PR can get merged. If not, then the PR will fail merging, and it's good because that way we put guardrails with documentation. So we make sure that it is up to date and even existent. And you can also do CI/CD for documentation. You can do validations to make sure that there are no broken links. Use linters. There are two tools that I can tell you about. Docosaurus, which also allows you to push code to a front end to see the docs in a UI portal, for example. Also, it deals with docs versioning and stuff like that. And also Swim. Swim is an Israeli company. That's why I know about it. I haven't used it myself, but I've seen a very promising demo. So I think it should be at least worthwhile to examine. And it offers a lot of features too. So, and also in the right, I quoted something from the Google style guide. Docs thrive when they're treated like tests, a necessary chore one learns to savor because it will reward over time. And that's exactly it. If we introduce tests, not only in our code, but also for documentation, that we will see it will be very easy to maintain documents in an ongoing manner. We will be able to maintain them, like to make sure that they are up to date. They wouldn't go stale, and then they could actually be beneficial every time and not just whenever we need something and then we remember, we have a document, let's see if it's even relevant or not. Another phase of running the documentation for us is to remember our audience. So first of all, we started with knowing your audience. Now we need to remember them. So we know that we know the user flow, right? They search for something, they scan it, navigate elsewhere if they need to, and then a result. Now we need to have this user flow in mind. So since the user scanned the documents, we need to write the document in order that will help the user get whatever they need to get very quickly. So write the things in the document in the most used things to the most rarely things. So for example, the GitLab documentation, I started out with how to upgrade because GitLab releases versions like every month or something like that. So I assumed, during the migration, I upgraded like 5 or 6 times. I assumed they will do it as well. So I started out with how to upgrade the system. Then I moved to the certificates, because certificates you need to replace every 2 years. So then where all the certificates are stored, how to renew them, how to replace them, etc. And then I left at the end the integrations, because the integrations like with Jenkins and Jira, you need to do it only at the end, only first time when you deploy GitLab for the first time. So that's why it's in the end. But as I mentioned before, I also covered how to open the support ticket and to avoid the ping pong between you and support. This was also covered in the documentation because I remembered the audience. I remember that the audience for that documentation is my team members. I knew that they will eventually, sometime will need to open tickets. I wanted to save some trouble from them. So that's why I also cover this in the documentation as well. So cover from the most used things to the most rarely. And that way, people will just be able to scan the document, say, I need to upgrade. Bam, I found it at the beginning. I don't need to waste too much time on this documentation and find whatever I need quickly. Concept versus tasks. So this is what I meant before when I said don't make your document minimal and don't make it about too many things. Because of that, you should think about 2 types of documentation. Concepts versus tasks. And basically, this is about what your audience wants. If they want to know something, AKA concepts, Then write on this documentation information, background, explanations, reasoning, intentions, anything that is related more to information and the background kind of things and concepts. As opposed to, if they want to do something, tasks, then the document should be in a how-to manner. And don't confuse between the two. Don't put two things at once, because whenever I need, like in the middle of the night, I need to do something, this is a pure how-to. I don't care in the middle of the night how the system works. I just want to know how to replace the configuration in server X. That's it. So that's why we need to make the documentation very clear and very concise to the pillar that it is in, concept or task. And just, I'm not saying the other type is not important, it's super important, but it shouldn't be in the same document. It should be in link. So if I have a concept, a document of how the system works, have a link to how to do X in that system. And through these links, you still cover everything, because you allow the user to know more, but it's still separate enough to cover only the things that the user wants to know about in this point in time. And then you are able to provide your users with what they need very, very quickly. Last phase of writing technical documentation is to share the document with others, basically a feedback loop. Because why do we need to do that? Because what's straightforward to us is not necessarily straightforward for other people. Let's say I used initials that, for me, it's very straightforward, but people don't know about it, and I need to explain it. Or I assumed a certain flow is everyone in the team knows about, but actually it's not the case. I need to explain it. So through this feedback loop, this way they can understand, they can show us what is not clear in the document, because after all, the document was written for them, for their knowledge, and they can tell us, oh, wait, I don't understand this, or I read the documentation and I have some more questions, and then you can cover the questions, answers in the document as well. So share the document with others before you formally release it, and have a feedback loop to make sure that everything is really covered and really clear to your audience that reads it. And yeah, and it's very important, because that way you make the document more concise, more coherent, and more helpful for your audience. And I said that the entire process is about not being a technical writer, because you don't have to be a technical writer in order to write technical documentation. But if you do want to perfect your English, if you do want to make your technical documentation in a high quality state, I gathered tips both from my side and from a colleague of mine who is a technical writer. And you can find these tips in this document. I'm going to add more to it as I go along and write more and more technical documentation. So if you do care about it, you can scan it and find more tips there. I'll give you a second to take the QR code. He's there. I'll give you okay. I have to share a story with you. It's not related to the presentation, but I have to share it because it reminded me. You know, waiting for an audience to take a picture, that's cool. But as a public speaker, I always tell people, don't put too much content to read on the slides, because you need to listen to me and not read the slides. And then there was a conference where the woman said she put a lot of, a use case covered there, and then she said, okay, now I'm gonna give you a minute to read. And I'm like, no, don't do that. You need to talk it through, So, sorry, I just thought about it. And if you ever do practice public speaking, don't write too much things on the slides. Okay, writing tips, yes, awesome. If you do want to, that is great. And basically, that's it. So, people say, and I get this a lot, I'm not a technical writer, or I'm not accustomed to write technical documentation, and that's why I built this entire presentation. And you take out of this whatever you want, but at least there is a golden rule that if you say I'm not a technical writer or anything in this manner, have this a golden rule in mind in which you need to provide your readers with the information they need and send them back to their task as soon as possible, because the documentation should be clear, simple, and to the point. And what you write is very useful and helpful as long as it is concise and clear. So just at least have this golden rule in mind, and this will help you write documentation in any manner that you will have going forward. And one small tip for managers in terms of technical documentation. Let's say you can't at the moment adopt like tools that will help you with documentation, automation, stuff like that. How can you make sure documentation is still treated as part of the day-to-day and really people maintain it in their day-to-day? Basically, make it an integral part of the task, aka the task definition of done is when the documentation was added. So the people are not allowed to close the tickets unless they updated the documentation or at least made sure there is a documentation that covers that aspect. And I said it is for managers, but actually it's not only for managers, because people, developers like you can say, hey, I've seen this awesome presentation about technical documentation. I now understand why it's so important to write technical documentation. Please, I want to update now. We have code. I want to update, or I want to sit down for 2 hours and write documentation. I really, really highly doubt it that your team leader will say, nah, leave it. It's not important. I really highly doubt it. I think that they will appreciate it, and they will give you the time necessary to write documentation. So it's not really for managers, it's for everyone. If you will want to sit down and write documentation, I'm sure that your team leader will allow you the time to do that. So I hope that after this presentation, you can say, you will write documentation, and you can say that your code is well documented. And I really hope that you will embrace the tips and the methodologies that I gave you, and embrace documentation and maintain it, so we'll be able to say that. And that's it. Thank you very much. And I think I have time for questions if you have one. Yes.
So, taking something from your last presentation to this one, would you recommend, or does it make sense if you were doing alerts from your code saying that there's a problem, would you put in maybe reference documents about, hey, if you're getting this thing, check out this?
Definitely, yeah. And I'll put it in the tasks type of documentation. Yeah, because it makes sense. Because why are we doing things? Because we need to maintain systems. How do we maintain systems? Or how do we know if systems had issues? Through alerts. So if I can link them and basically reference them during incidents, or even know that this should be referred during an incident, then I should know about it up front, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I'll get back to you. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you say that people ask you deliberately to put it in conference? So I would try first to do like a culture shift. Like, yeah, we had conference until now, but check it out. We have this code which is, this method which makes me update the document even much more quickly, and that way, and not quickly, but like in an ongoing manner, and that way you don't need to come to me to make sure the document is updated or not. You know for sure it is up to date. And then you convince them that they should shift with this method like you, because it will serve their needs as well. So I would not go with that, especially if we already moved to Dox's code. I would try to do like cultural and organizational change in my company to make sure that everyone understands the importance of Dox's code and utilize that. And only if it's not, then I would, but I would try that first. Yes.
To do with all documentation. I've worked for a hosting company. We documented every server we had, especially if there were special settings. And after a while, people are changing things on computers. Finally, server gets decommissioned, but the methods, which are general for 10 machines, is still there. And finally, or you have to review your documentation every year to make sure that there's no, well, we have tons of documentation, but I think at least maybe half of it was not relevant anymore.
So that's what I meant by like making it an integral part of a task. Of course, when you need to sit like retrospectively and check all your documentation, this is hideous and takes a lot of time. But in order to avoid that, like it's like doing the dishes, right? It's very easy to, you finished eating, right? If rinse the dishes now and not pile it up in the sink and then wash only when it's full.
Yeah, I understand. But sometimes we had documentation which was relevant to, for example, 20 servers, and then you're changing a system and it's relevant to 10 servers, 5 servers, or less servers, and finally the documentation is still there,
Mm-hmm.
but the method should not exist anymore for new equipment. And the people who are working on machines, they don't know for if you have lots of machines, for example, then it's not clear for how many machines it's still relevant. So they don't have clue about when to delete it.
So, but that's exactly the thing that you need to cover in the documentation. They need to be covered like this part is relevant for X, but this part is relevant for Y. And when do I decide when to do X and Y? It needs to be very clear the path to go, because that way you don't leave stuff for I don't know what to do about it. They know because it is very well defined in documentation. So don't just define what is the configuration, but also define when to do X and that. Like use this if this, but use that if Y. And this could be. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that you have to be methodical about it in order to really be able to maintain it in the long run. But also, again, I would, if it's very painful, I would revisit tools that will help you do it automatically, because that way it will help you. Some tools help you change things by themselves, like detect things that repetitive in a lot of documentation, and they change the references on their own. So these tools can help you there too. Any other questions? Yes.
My question is about motivation for the person who should write the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
I have a colleague who don't want to write documentation. Is there a nice way to motivate him, or do you have I can say, all right, documentation is out of the company, but is there a nice way?
So I would take all the reasons that I showed here, and I would try to use it on him. So like if I assume it's a him, but it could be a she. Let's call them they, okay? Let's say if they care about their career, then writing documentation is important for visibility. So tell them, if you want to progress if you like the workplace, and you want to progress in the chain of, role of command or something, writing documentation will help you achieve that. If you want to, do you want to go on vacation with a clear mind, or you want to still be available for work calls? If you like to be available and you like job security, then you belong to the old age and you can keep it. But I like my vacation days. I like to go and be really with a clear mind. So if they like to be available for work calls, nothing to do about it. But if they are like me and they do value their vacation, then they will understand the importance of sharing the knowledge, because that way, and it happened to me all the time, there was systems that other team member created and maintained, and only through the documentation, because he did documentation, I was able to maintain it while he was away on vacation. So I would just try, from what you know this colleague, check the reasons and see from your knowing of them, what will work on them best. And we can talk about that more outside, and maybe I'll help you more. Any other questions?